So I just say a very warm welcome to the London DiscourseNet seminar. Someone is waiting in the lobby. It's good to see you all again. We are so sorry that we are starting slightly late this academic year. We're going to start with a brief introduction by Johannes about DiscourseNet, and then I'll introduce today's speaker.
Yeah, and as I said, I may get the message for people who didn't quite know how to register. So you would need to send around the message in order to avoid that, because I just had my phone.
Okay.
So I'll say a few things about DiscourseNet. DiscourseNet is an association of discourse studies. It covers all kinds of international tendencies around the world, and we started to become an official association in 2019. We have various events every year. There's bigger biannual events. There's smaller congresses and also workshops. DiscourseNet facilitates all kinds of activities. There are reading groups, there's seminars like this one, for example, and you're very much welcome to join the community. We also invite you to consider joining DiscourseNet as a fee-paying member. The fee is 30 euros a year, and it allows you to connect and to work with other members and realize your projects. If you have any questions about DiscourseNet, I'd suggest that you get in touch with somebody from the board, and they will be certainly happy to help you through with everything. You know, the webpage. The webpage basically is open to everybody, and in order to follow the seminar, we invite you to register in this group. And I guess somebody can send around the links for this group as well as for the DiscourseNet membership page. And yeah, and now I wonder whether everybody is there. What about Shespal? He was still struggling. Oh yeah, Shespal is there. That's great.
Shespal is there. I haven't opened the microphones yet. I need to work that out. I will do that in a second. So a tiny bit of housekeeping. We are recording these sessions, so if you do not want to be on camera, please do not put your camera on. I will later on, after Andreas has given his paper, open the microphones and allow you to open your microphones and cameras. To ask questions, you can also put them in the chat. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Andreas Musolff, who's Emeritus Professor at the University of East Anglia. To me, quite well known as a political discourse analyst, worked quite widely on political use of metaphor, but has worked also on intercultural communication and on a discourse of COVID. And I think today he's going to combine the COVID discourse and the political discourse element. So I'm very curious to hear about that, and open the floor to you, Andreas.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Very well.
Yeah. And can you see the slide?
Not
Yes.
at the moment, I can't, but it will probably come in a minute.
On my screen, it's the privilege of having a phone here.
Okay. I can't see the slide.
I can see it.
Okay. Odd.
So I can see the first slide.
The first slide, yes.
Okay. Probably takes me a moment.
Yeah. Okay, then I'll get started. Thank you very much for having me in this fascinating series of discourse analysis talks. I would like to speak a little bit about the use that Reichsbürger groups in Germany have made of COVID-19's conspiracy theories. These are the main points of my structure. First, I'll talk a little bit about Reichsbürger for people who know them perhaps only vaguely. I won't go into too much detail. If necessary, we can take it up again in the discussion. Then about conspiracy theories, then about the role of war scenarios, what I call war scenarios or war metaphor scenarios in the Reichsbürger COVID-19 conspiracy theories. CTs are conspiracy theories, and the possibility of deconstructing, criticizing them, and further research perspectives. So I move on first to the Reichsbürger. There is quite a lot of stuff on the slides. I will not read through all of that and bombard you with it. As I said, if there are details that you want to know more about, we can pick this up later. These groups, the Reichsbürger groups, have developed since the 1980s and have survived through the so-called reunification in 1990. And since 2000, they have been growing. And since 2020, they have really grown very rapidly. And in December 2022, which most of us probably will be aware of, there was the arrest of 27 leading members of the Reichsbürger groups. They are not very well defined, but they can be summarized under this title, who planned a putsch against the Federal Republic of Germany, which included arresting the government, execution of certain leading politicians and even individual ministers like the current health Minister Lauterbach, the dissolution of parliament and other stuff that you would expect from what are, for better or worse, neo-Nazis. Their core beliefs are that the current German state is not legitimate, that it is not the legal successor of the German Empire, which was founded in 1871 and ended without proper formal dissolution in 1945. And the biggest piece of evidence for this hair-raising stance is that there is no peace treaty after World War II, as there was one after World War I. The implications are that the constitution of the current state is null and void, that the international treaties that it has entered in are null and void, that there is a necessity of a new peace treaty, and they also refer to some ambiguous formulations in the basic law and in findings of the Supreme Court from the 1970s. And as a sort of final result, they see themselves as freedom fighters against a puppet regime ruling the Federal Republic of Germany on behalf of Western occupation forces. There is some microphone open, which is a little bit irritating. Sorry. Could someone shut that microphone, please? The terminology and symbolism of the Reichsbürger refers back to the pre-1945 name of Germany, of the German nation state Deutsches Reich, German Empire, but most specifically and most openly, they try to refer back to the empire founded by Otto von Bismarck in 1871, which lasted until the end of World War I, with the flag of the empire, which you see here on the slide, which has different colors from the current flag and the imperial eagle. There is a variation, so some groups are referring specifically to the pre-1918 Reich, some to the pre-1933 Weimar Republic, which still nominally called itself Deutsches Reich, and some even include the Nazi Reich, if you like. And they also come in slightly different flavors. They call themselves citizens of or subjects of the German Reich or the Kingdom of Prussia or the Kingdom of Germany and such stuff. When they are referred to by others, including, for instance, the police and justice institutions, they are called Reichsbürger, or sometimes Reichsbürger and Selbstverwalter, self-governed, or also identitarians. So there are no absolutely hard and fast definitions or group memberships, but their numbers are reliably, conservatively estimated to be in the region of 20,000 plus. There are some groups or perhaps individuals who on the internet try to actually play around with the term Reichsbürger and reject that term because, ironically, because it is a Nazi term. It was defined in the Nazi Nuremberg laws in 1935, and they say, oh, you are discriminating us poor neo-Nazis as Reichsbürger, and Reichsbürger is a Nazi term, and you shouldn't do that, which is, of course, extremely facetious and devious. The point that I wanted to highlight and use as it was a starting point for my argument is that there is a potential paradox in the fact that the Reichsbürger's point of historical reference is either the old Kaiserreich or even the Nazi Reich. Both of them were authoritarian states that never indulged civil disobedience or resistance against their executive measures, and certainly not when it concerned curbing epidemics or other public health threats. So if you had such a health threat in the old Kaiserreich or in Nazi Germany, and people needed to be vaccinated or obey other measures, the state did not think twice about indulging your misgivings about it, or so they would simply enforce it. Furthermore, right-wing groups like the Reichsbürgers tend to have a sympathy for strongly repressive measures against epidemics linked to minority groups, as shown in the 1980s with regard to AIDS, when the predecessors of the Reichsbürgers and of the current day AfD and even parts of the CDU and CSU on the sort of legitimate right-hand side of politics in Germany argued in favor of isolating AIDS people and putting them on an island or concentrating them in camps and such stuff. So one might wonder, how could this projected identification with strong state traditions be compatible with this anti-COVID-19 stance and conspiracy theories and anti-vaccination activism, so that the Reichsbürger groups could ally themselves to the Corona protest movement? And jumping back to the last but one slide for a second, this photo was taken at an anti-Corona demonstration against the government in 2020. So how on earth do people who are in favor of bringing back the old empire, how do they square that with the fact that they are against anti-pandemic measures? So as a second point, I want to move on to conspiracy theories, and there is a lot of discussion about that. I won't go into it. As a working definition, I would say the characteristic thing is that it's a narrative account of a problem or crisis that is interpreted as a result of a nefarious conspiracy. So the Reichsbürgers believe that the current German state, the Federal Republic, has a vassal status as a result of an international conspiracy to colonize Germany after 1945. But of course, as you probably all know, conspiracy theories are nowadays applied to almost any kind of problem or crisis: mass immigration, the pandemic, economic crises, alleged discrimination by foreign states, alleged media manipulation, alleged causation of or profiteering from wars such as the Ukraine-Russia war, or what is going on in Israel and Palestine at the moment. So they are all supposed to be the effect of some secret conspiracy behind it. Conspiracy theories, as I see them, are narrative structures, so stories. And that is quite important for their assessment, because in the existing literature is usually pointed out and exemplified over and over again that conspiracy theories are bad theories because they lack their factual basis, they lack logic, they have a simplistic ontology, they are full of fallacies and non sequiturs, and of course these are all deficiencies from the perspective of a proper scientific theory. And therefore, these descriptions of conspiracy theories as basically logical rubbish are very popular with academics. However, that does not explain why they are attractive. And in my view, the strength and attractiveness of conspiracy theories as stories is that they suggest to the hearers that they share with the speaker a deeper, privileged understanding of an important problem. They suggest clear distinctions, us versus them. They allocate salient roles, the culprits, the victims, the heroes, the traitors, etc. And they justify clear-cut actions and action plans. So my first hypothesis, therefore, is that the narrative dimension of conspiracy theories helps to override their cognitive weaknesses by way of supplying an analogical scenario for the core story and blurring the lines between factual and non-factual contents. So you are told behind the problem there is this conspiracy. The conspiracy theory, the conspiracy is described in more or less metaphorical ways, and then it is suggested that as a clever reader or hearer, you should draw your conclusions from that. And the link between conspiracy theories or stories and metaphors is that metaphors too have an implicit meaning narrative attached to them. I call them scenarios. So for instance, if you describe a political crisis as an illness, then the scenario is you must get some healing for it. So you must consult a doctor, you must take a medicine or even have an operation, and then you will be healed. You don't normally talk about illnesses as just problems that go away by themselves. So my argument then is that these metaphor scenarios are not accidental to conspiracy stories, but that they fulfill an essential function as discourse templates which sustain the coherence and the evaluative bias and the emotive appeal of the conspiracy theory. Now, focusing a little bit more on metaphors in COVID-19 debates, I think we are all still close enough to what happened over the last 3 years to remember them. the pandemic as a flood, the pandemic as a fire, the pandemic as a devil's work, or the pandemic as war. And going on from what I said before, there are always implied conclusions from these metaphors. So if it's a flood, well, it's bigger than us, it overwhelms us. If it's a fire, it completely destroys us. If it's a devil work, well, we are going to hell. And if it's a war, we are under attack and have to fight back. Now, war declarations happen to, war metaphor scenarios happen to be very, very popular during the COVID-19 discourse, right from the start. And in March 2020, you had almost every government declaring war against the virus or against the pandemic. And there was a lot of criticism of that. But the reason why politicians used it was, of course, that they said, yes, we are taking action. We are doing something. And in the UK, if you remember, Boris Johnson was invoking the Blitz or the Bulldog or the Churchill spirit to describe his own wonderful leadership against the pandemic. In America, Trump fought against the China virus. So against a particular nation state that had launched it against the poor United States of America. And in Germany, you had the Reichsbürger arguing that they were in a war against foreign occupation, and they were the ones saving the fatherland. In particular, you then had various main types of conspiracy theories. The first one, the first bullet point, refers to the hoax theory, which Trump first used. The whole is an invented nonsense story invented by the Democrats and the leftists and the media to bring down his wonderful government. And this appealed very strongly to totally risk-denying recipients who thought, it's all rubbish and we don't need to do anything. The next one that Trump also used was, it's a national war of defense against an enemy aggressor. So that acknowledged that the pandemic was real, but allocated it to a culprit nation like China, etc. This happened not just in the United States, incidentally, but across the whole world with various enemy states identified, etc. This was in terms, there is research that in terms of the risk stance of recipients, this was particularly attractive to risk-averse recipients who then went either into, because they wanted to avoid the risk of infection, would either comply with the public protection or go into the so-called prepper behavior of thinking up their own defense. And you then have the global civil war version, where it's not a particular nation state, but an international secret elite conspiracy where they routinely suspect certain figures like Bill Gates or George Soros and link them to QAnon and other such mega conspiracy theories, also with anti-Muslim and anti-Jewish and anti-Asian prejudices. And that again appeals to recipients with emphatic prepping behavior, but prepping against the alleged state oppression, namely, for instance, the vaccination program. And this led in various countries Germany was the first, but the big events in the United States and in Brazil were also linked to it. Namely, you have right-wing activists together with anti-COVID-19 protesters who try to storm parliament buildings and engage with violent battle-like confrontations with the police. And to illustrate that in the German case, here you have the picture from 2020, where the Reichsbürger, you can see their flags on the left-hand side, try to storm the entrance of the Reichstag, the parliament building, which ironically is also still called Reich, or connected with the Reich. And the German police actually kicking several of them, you see on the right hand, one of them, down the stairs and managing through their brave behavior to stop them in their tracks. But the interesting thing is, from the point of metaphor and its impact, that these people not just talk about war, and not think about it in their own little groups. No, they take it into the public and try to enact it in what looks like a kind of medieval semi-battle. And as we know from the case of the USA, there were even fatalities in these attempts, and usually they end up with quite hefty violence. So in order to reconstruct the reasoning of the Reichsbürger conspiracy theorists and their integration of the COVID-19 theories, there is the basic assumption, the premise, if you like, the current German state is illegitimate. Therefore, I don't need to believe or follow its instructions, including the pandemic instructions. Now, applying this to the particular case of the COVID-19, if it's a hoax, then it's one propagated falsely by an illegitimate government, perhaps acting on foreign orders. Therefore, I completely reject the lockout and testing and any other measures. And this has motivated and empowered individuals to actually attack, in some cases fatally attack, medical staff, police, and members of the public who had the temerity of telling them they should put on masks or they should keep their distance, etc. If, on the other hand, you assume the pandemic is real, then you still can operate your Reichsbürger conspiracy theory, namely you say the pandemic has been imported from foreign states, and this links up with the, again, with a prepper-style self-empowered private health defense. You build your little bunker and shoot down everyone carrying the horrible infection to you. Application number 3, if you concentrate on the vaccination as a trick used by global elites to effect chip implementation for population management or the Great Exchange or something like that, then you link up with risk-taking anti-vax movements in order to overthrow the corona dictatorship. So vis-à-vis the pandemic, you are still risk-averting, but vis-à-vis the state, you are ready to take up arms or the violent struggle or the freedom fight, whatever you want to call it. So the role of the war scenario in these blended conspiracy theories is the self-identification. It enables the self-identification of the conspiracy theory holders as freedom fighters in a localized version of the global conflict between good and evil, common people and evil conspirators. on the occasion of the pandemic. And the enemy, that is crucial, is no longer the virus or the pandemic, but a specific political adversary or foreign state or global elite that you must take up arms against. And this, in my view, solves the imagined paradox or contradiction, or, namely, the Reichsbürger who are in favor of a strong state see themselves on this occasion as freedom fighters who at the moment have to overthrow the current state, and after that put in place a new state which, as a legitimate state, would perfectly be entitled to use repression, for instance, in order to enforce a pandemic avoidance strategy. But at the moment, the overthrow of the state takes precedence over what would be the case in the future imaginary ideal Reich. How can we fight against this? After all, conspiracy theories as well as Reichsbürger groups are known as dangerous. They are known as and have been proven to have very, to put it mildly, problematic consequences. So there have been many attempts to counteract them. And as regards conspiracy theories, the standard academic reaction, but also that of many institutional and even political authorities, has been to say they get their facts wrong, they get their figures wrong, or they are using dubious metaphors like war metaphors, and therefore they cannot be proper theories. I think that that is both a tactical and a conceptual mistake. These conspiracy theories, when they are enhanced by such metaphor scenarios, have to be taken seriously because they are so powerful rhetorically by offering problem solutions as self-fulfilling prophecies. So if you do that, you are guaranteed a solution, a victory, a wonderful new state of affairs. They strongly enhance emotional identification to the point of people feeling empowered to use violence, and denunciation of critics as traitors or deserters. Think of Dr. Fauci in America, Dr. Whitty, Professor Whitty in Britain, or Lauterbach in Germany, who all had to be put under strong police protection because there were so many death threats against them. They are able to immunize themselves against criticism because they denounce everyone who even dares to question their conspiracy theories immediately as part of the conspiracy themselves. And the conspiracy theory allows them to change their explanations and vacillate between fictional and factual levels quite easily, because, and the respective populist politicians who we all know and love are very, very clever and flexible at saying, oh, that was just an exaggeration, or that was just a metaphor, or that was just a joke even. So they are perfectly capable of using these kinds of metaphor sliding scale to direct false fake statements in a way in which they can cancel one or the other little details, whether the facts or the metaphors, and still get away with keeping up the conspiracy scenario in which they are operating, linked to the war scenario in which their recipients should fight for them. So, lastly, if we take this seriously, how can we research it? In the first place, I would say we need more cognitive studies of these war scenario-based arguments and their entailments across diverse crises. There are also already psycholinguistic experiments on war scenarios, but they have not been, to my knowledge, linked with experiments on conspiracy stories. But it is perfectly possible to envisage such experiments where you would have a conspiracy theory presented to people with or without the war scenario, and then see whether it makes a difference in their attitude changing. And lastly, we also need narratological analyses of the changes in the conspiracy stories in response to changes in public discourse. So in the case of the COVID-19, Trump, for instance, managed very smoothly to go on from the hoax version to the anti-China version, although they are logically contradictory. Even there is some research on other conspiracy stories, even over the centuries, like, for instance, the witch mythology in early modernity, which changed over the decades and centuries and were adapted to the social and political interests of the speakers. And ideally, one could derive some practical applications from these, for instance, by way of didactic toolkits that expose the character, the fictional character of these conspiracy stories, and develop counter narratives to explain social crises. And that is it. Here are a few references. Thank you very, very much for listening. So I'm available for discussion and questions, of course.
Thank you very much, Andreas. If you could unshare your slides so people can we can see each other when we talk to each other.
Yeah.
And I will stop the recording so we don't have the discussion on the recording. Okay. So that we can then sort of